In this video I'll be walking you through the process of mining for void opals using FAOff. The goal of this video is to get you a full idea of what techniques and methods that I use as part of this process. You begin by going into the detailed surface scanner, firing off a probe, which will then populate it with your hotspots, which show up as the red-orange blobs. I tend to go not for the center of the void opal hotspot, especially in populated areas. You may find that if everybody else is going to the center as well, that will be the most heavily mined area and therefore the hardest place to find the motherlode asteroids that you're looking for. So what I tend to do is start at a point towards the edge and then use the center of the hotspot as the anchor point, which I then will target myself towards. So if you drop into the hotspot at not too fast a speed, just to make sure you don't take any damage. And then just take a moment to get your bearings. The ring that I'm using is quite a good one for avoidable mining because it's all dark already. The arrival star is quite a long way away. Let's see. So about 3,000 light seconds away from the actual place where I'm going to be mining. So it's quite beneficial for me that even when it is in direct light from the arrival star, I'm still in relative darkness. You want to use night vision mode so you can see what you're doing and where you're going. And the technique that I use for finding asteroids to mine is quite dependent on flight assist, so it's quite a good way to both develop and practice your flight assist skills, as well as super useful for being able to... being scanned. That should be fine, they're just security. So it's a good way to develop your flight assist skills. My flight assist off skills have hugely improved as part of the process of developing my mining skills. But it's also a good time to start. So you want to have a pulse wave scanner. All of the motherlode asteroids will be identically shaped within each ring type. So all of the motherlode asteroids within a ice ring will all look the same. All of the motherlode asteroids within a rocky ring will all look the same, and all of the motherlode asteroids in, I believe, metal rich and metallic both have the same looking asteroids. I think this might be the correct look. Yeah, it looks good for the shape, but I can't see any fissures, so I'm not going to waste a prospector limpet on it. I'm not sure if that is even good for the shape. This one here looks like it is actually more what I'm looking for, and that's definitely the correct shape, but it's not coming up on the pulse wave analyzer as one for me to have a closer look at. You'll get used to what sort of shape you are looking for. In the icy rings, people often refer to it as looking a bit like a popcorn. And this one is definitely the correct shape. But again, I don't see any fissures, so I'm not going to pop off a prospector on it. The reason that it's really useful to be able to use night vision as well as be in a fully dark or almost fully dark. I mean, it's not totally pitch black, I can still see just about where I'm going if the night vision's off. But I don't have any direct bright light on the asteroid ring, which means it's much easier for me to find the fissures using night vision, and once I find some, then I'll be able to show you what I mean. So what I'm about to do now, that I've had a look at some of the closer ones from the drop point, is start moving through the asteroid field. I'm going to use the center of the hotspot as my marker point, which I will target towards and drift towards as part of the process of basically sifting through all the different asteroids I can come across. That looks so bright. Is that the one? That's the one I looked at already. Flight assist off is incredibly useful for this stage. As you can see, what this allows me to do is if I set my speed in the sort of blue region on the speed bar, that means I have the greatest speed for maneuverability thrusters and looking around. So my pitch rate and my yaw rate are the highest that I can get when I'm moving at this speed, with the exception of when I am using boosters. And that's incredibly useful for me because it means that I can just move around, have a little nose, and quite freely look around the asteroid ring. If I wasn't able to do this, the other technique that I would be using would be to use headlook instead, but I find it far preferable to be able to pitch my entire ship around rather than being dependent on headlook. We'll have a look at this little one, which was good shape, good colour. But again, I just don't see any fissures, so we're going to leave this, go back to a position above the asteroids. So the way I have my control input set up, I'm a keyboard and mouse player. I've got my good one. Pitch and yaw to the mouse, and I've got my other thrusters on my keyboard. I don't think that's the right shape. Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, definitely the right shape. And we also have fissures as well. So the reason that it's good to do your mining at least in a spot where you can have a good dark side of the asteroid is because this is what you're looking for before you plant a prospector on your target motherlode asteroid. You can see the fissure before you've prospected it, and it is much easier to see if you get the contrast from night vision. If you're in direct light, you can still see them sort of, but they're just not as clearly visible. Even if you have night vision, if you're in direct light, the night vision isn't effective. But you can see just how clear that is to look at when you've got night vision on and you're in darkness. So once you've spotted a motherlode asteroid that's got fissures like that, you fire off a prospector to it. And we've been quite lucky in that the first asteroid I found is a void opals motherlode. Next step, go to your contacts and look through your asteroid fissures. You're looking for low strength ones first, and my technique usually is to put 2 maximum strength seismic charges on low strength fissures, and then sort of judge from there. If I've gone too far, then they'll deactivate one of them and pop onto an average, or pop less strength onto another low if I'm lucky enough to have a few low, and just sort of work it into the blue section from here. So you see the first one's off, and I've got in the top right hand corner my detonation yield target. You'll see the orange. You'll see the orange. Above that is a blue section, which is where I'm aiming for, and above that again is the red section, which is you've gone too far. It's just gonna break. If you're in the orange, it's not going to do a very good explosion. If you go to the red, then it's sorry. If you go to the orange, you're not going to do a very good explosion. It probably won't crack the asteroid. If you're in the red, then it will crack the asteroid, but you won't get a very good yield because it will damage too much of the fragments that you're mining. So we'll put a full strength on the average, and I might put it just on the edge of blue. So we'll probably go for, if we've got another average, is a lower strength charge on the average. Where are you? So the low, average, high is an indicator of how much damage you can do to the asteroid with it. So a low strength fissure will be able to do the most damage to the asteroid. So it makes it much more sensitive to how much power you put in. That wasn't quite enough. So if you put a charge on a low fissure, it will, for the equivalent amount of charge that you put into the seismic charge, it would do a greater amount to the detonation yield bar. And you see I've gone too far there, so I'll just have to turn that one off. Probably do something similar on a high instead. If you deactivate a... Oh. Come on. That'll do. If you deactivate a charge on a fissure, then it will not leave that fissure available for you. So you do have to be a little bit conservative about how you lay the charges and not just put them on willy-nilly, partly because of the time limit, which usually I'm better with, but I'm not explaining at the same time usually. And partly because you do have a limited number of fissures, and if you just pop them on and then just deactivate them, then you will run out of fissures eventually. So you can't really plan it out that way. You need to be a bit mindful. Usually one full strength low, and then depending on where that sits, you'll probably get a feel for it as well. You either want to go for another full strength low, or almost, sometimes that might even pop it too far, so a mid strength low. And then just sort of work from there, and you'll get used to how much charge you want to put on. And then I go about with my limpets. I will position myself as close to the initial fragments as possible, and I'll follow my limpets around as they move, which is just to reduce the time that it takes for them to pick these up. If I'm closer to the target fragments, that was probably them landing quite heavily. If you're close to the target fragments, then they will obviously return to your cargo hatch more quickly, so you reduce the amount of time they spend doing this. And it's also good practice, again good practice for FAOff skills. If you target each of the deposits, you'll see it gives you a reticle for where to aim your abrasion blaster. The abrasion blaster will inherit momentum from how you're moving, so if you see from here, you'll see how it moves around and it's not just staying at the center point. And that's because the momentum that your ship carries with it will also have an effect on the direction that your abrasion blaster takes, or the path it tracks to. If you get used to it, you will be able to just pop them off without actually having to target them. I tend to just use the targeting as a way to figure out where they are if I've lost track whilst I'm moving around. Oh, that was not a very good shot. There we go. And you'll notice that occasionally I will come back into flight assist on. In general, I spend most of my time in flight assist off, but I will use flight assist on just to bring myself to a complete stop, especially inside the middle of asteroids where you don't necessarily want to just be floating around really. I tend to not probably pay enough attention to my environment and do donk about stuff, but I do find it much more interesting to fly in this way than it is otherwise. Have I got everything there? And then you can see I'd already picked up one asteroid before starting this video, and I'm currently at 28, so averaging about 14 tons per asteroid. Now that's done, so let's just pop everything back into shield and engines, and we're ready to carry on. Come back out, and we're back to floating above the asteroid field once you have a look for more asteroids to mine. So what you're looking for primarily will be the shape of the asteroid, and then the intensity of the light, and then as you get up close you can check to see if the asteroid is the right shape, and I don't think that one is. It's probably not bright enough either, but sometimes I do find that the colour that passes, no, it's definitely not the right shape. I find that the colour that passes with analyzer pops out isn't super consistent. It sometimes changes as you're looking looking around. Sometimes I find that the initial scan that it gives me will sort of stutter and then change completely, and it's when that happens I find it's the initial ones from the scan that are actually the ones I want to have a look at. That's a good shape, but no fissures on it. And I find that this is a really good space for me to practice my using boosters to manoeuvre myself around. Whilst I'm having a little scan about, if I spot something, then I can very quickly use them just to change my... Is that going to be something over there? Very quickly use them just to change my direction. And using half boosters, which I'll explain in a second, just very briefly. There's videos that have better detail about it. But using half boosters, then I can very quickly change my facing and my trajectory. That's a bad shape. Without finding I pick up too much momentum, and what you generally don't want to do is find yourself boosting into an asteroid, because that will hurt. I've got quite weak bi-weave shields on this one because it is a pure mining ship, so it doesn't really have that much flexibility for me to power into stuff at full speed. So the half boost basically functions on the rationale that when you deploy either landing gear or your cargo scoop, that will limit your maximum speed regardless of whether or not you're boosting. And as soon as you're over that maximum speed, it will start trying to pull you back to that maximum speed. I think generally the actual speed that the landing gear will limit you to, and I assume it's probably the same for the cargo scoop, is half of your standard base speed. I tend to find that if I do a half boost, well, I can probably just do a test. So if I do that now, you see it takes me up to about 270 odd. If I take off my landing gear, you see my max boost speed with what I've got in my cargo hold at the moment is about 540. So it's about half of your max boost speed that it seems to have taken it to there for me. If you look at my top speed, I think it was sitting around 400 when I didn't have anything in my hold, so let's see what it is now. Yes, my top speed's sitting around 400. If I turn on landing gear, it will start reining in my maximum speed. Let's just speed that process up a bit. And suddenly my maximum speed is sitting at 200. That's quite a useful thing to know in terms of when you want your maximum maneuverability for looking around. If you turn landing gear on, it will bring you to 200. If you turn it off, then you'll be sitting in the blue zone, so you can look about very freely suddenly. I think I probably tracked quite a distance away, so I'll look all around whilst I'm having another little nose. What other techniques do I use quite a lot? I changed my facing quickly with the half boost. Let's see what I come across as I do this stuff. Yeah, that's another thing that you can do, is if you think of a boost as being in two sections, the first section of it is the sudden input of a high ceiling for your maximum speed, as well as rapidly increasing that speed, and then it will peak, and then after that it will start to stall, and your maximum speed will again reduce back to what it was before, and your speed will start reducing back into that. If you are using half boosts and you don't want to go you don't want to fully cap your speed, then you can turn your landing gear off and on, just to take some of the oomph out of the boost, so that you don't go to your full boost speed, but you also don't just sit at lower speed. You can still go to near to your top speed. That's a good shape. And so you see what I did there was, my process is initiate a boost, turn on the landing gear straight away, then I start using my directional thrusters to much more rapidly put power into that direction. Once I'm facing in the direction I want to be facing in, because the landing gear is restricting how fast it will let me go overall, it means that more... That's a good asteroid. That's not a good asteroid. Because the landing gear restricts your overall speed, it makes it much more efficient at using your maneuverability thrusters, or your vertically lateral thrusters, because it will be inputting that power more so to those than it would to your forward thrust, whereas when you don't have your landing gear on, more of that speed goes into your forward thrust. And so then, once I was moving the ship in the direction I wanted it to be moving in, then I took my landing gear off and it started to return the full force of the boost to my forward thrusters. So it didn't lock me to that slower speed. Obviously it still didn't get me to the maximum thruster speed that it would have gotten to otherwise, but it's still a good sized boost when you want to close the ground quickly. I'll just do the same thing again. So here I'm using directional thrusters. You see it got me slightly over my full speed. And it's just a very quick, very easy way to change your direction, pretty much on a pin, without it becoming a dangerous thing in an asteroid field. And this is a great space to be able to practice it, because I find that if I'm doing something without a goal, then I become bored of it. So if I was just doing pure training, I'd just be flying around in circles for a bit and being like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? What's my target? Why am I actually doing this? Obviously it's training so you can get used to how your different ship mechanisms work, how momentum and how force works inside an asteroid field, but for me, having the goal that I'm designating a specific target with the pulse wave analyzer to actually zone in on, it makes it much more interesting for me. And once you start getting more used to this as well, it's something you can start to incorporate into combat to be able to change your ship's facing and turn to look at target ships much more rapidly than if you were not in flight assist off and not able to do that. There's other techniques that I am not so versed at for FAOff, such as booster bleeding technique, which uses a similar sort of ethos to bring yourself to a very rapid stop or turn over a very short distance, that doesn't use the landing gear in the same way, that instead it pushes more of the energy through your directional thrusters. But I am not practiced at that, and that's the next thing on my list for things to start to get to grips with. For now, I'd say I'm fairly comfortable with the half boost. But I'm definitely not on the same level as a PvP pilot doing something similar. No, that's the wrong shape. I would recommend for your ship loadouts for doing mining like this, having a really good distributor, which has preferably been engineered for charge speed, as well as really powerful thrusters that are dirty drag drives, makes the entire process a lot more enjoyable. Partly because you can move about much more quickly, so you can cover better ground, but also because it means that when you are manoeuvring close to the asteroids, you can quite quickly change your direction, or you can much more forcefully come to a stop or pivot around as and when you need to. So it just makes everything a lot nicer and a lot more fun. And I don't know if we're going to find some more void opals. I don't think that's bright enough, to be honest, but it won't hurt to have a little look-see. I think that's the right shape. No. That one's also a bad shape. These ones first. I think they're not going to be. I think I might have even looked at them already. And it's just a good chance to get some practice in manoeuvring around at the same time. can be a bit disorientating when you try and figure out what direction you're travelling in and where that last asteroid you saw was that you were going to have another look at, so you need to just not spend too much time digging around. That's the one. And you see fissure there, so we'll pop off prospector, and that's low temp diamonds, which is not what I'm looking for. So the main reason that you want to be above the asteroid field, the main two reasons you want to be above the asteroid field is firstly you don't have to worry about hitting anything on your way. You can just drift. I tend to sort of aim just in that sort of direction and drift that way. And the other one is that you get much better visibility. If you're in the middle of the asteroid field, all you can see is the asteroids directly around you. There's no fissures on this one. Oh, is there? Whereas if you come up above, I always forget how bad the reverse booster is on these. If you come up above the asteroid ring, then you can get a much better view. And something that's also good practice for is keeping a... Oh, did I look at that one already? I think I did. Is being mindful of the fact that your pitch rate in almost all ships is significant. I don't think I have looked at that one. Is that a good shape? Your pitch rate is significantly better than your yaw rate. So if you're trying to cover the ground quickly with how you're looking around, being able to roll your ship quickly so that your direction of tracking is in your pitch axis as opposed to your axis is incredibly useful. And this is another thing that is incredibly good to be able to do in combat, is to be able to control your roll, to make sure that you're keeping your target in your pitch instead of in your yaw. And this is a good time to be able to practice that skill whilst looking around in the asteroid field. And then the last thing I was going to show you is how you would do this if you wanted to go FAOn with it, if you're not a very confident FAOff pilot. My first recommendation would be just make the switch and stick to it and accept the fact you're going to maybe cop a few rebuys, but you just have to get along with it. But if that for you just isn't an option, then the way that I would get around that, and this really will depend on having a ship with a good cockpit visibility, but if you set 50% to your target speed so you're not going too fast, and then you use head look whilst you're pinging off, you'll see that if I look around, you can see that they are coming in and out of focus for the pulse wave analyzer, so it's actually using your pilot's facing, not your ship's facing, for what it highlights for you. So you just float like this in FAOn, and use your head look to look around instead. It's, for me, less elegant, and it's also less fun and less interesting, because you literally are just travelling in one direction. If you decide you want to do something, you see something you want to have a look at, then you have to then reset your head look and go through the process of figuring out where it was in relation to your ship. So it's a bit less quick, it's a bit less elegant, for me a bit less enjoyable. But if you're not comfortable going FAOff, then I guess that's the option for you. But as I said, there's no time at the present for getting started on something, so my recommendation is to go FAOff and stick with it, and maybe cop a few rebuys, but at least you're having fun and you're learning something new. And we'll just keep on going until hopefully I can find another void opal motherlode. And it can also be quite good for getting used to how you adjust your speed whilst you're facing in a different direction. So if you saw there, I realised that I was going a bit faster than I actually wanted to be going. I wasn't facing directly forwards, but I used my vertical thrusters to slow down my overall speed. So you can use this as an opportunity to practice all sorts of different ways of changing your momentum and velocity whilst you are in flight assist off, without having to worry about being shot at the same time, which is, you know, a more stressful environment for learning anything new. I would actually probably go so far to say that just practicing deep core mining in void opal mining has been probably the most significant thing that's improved my FAOff skills, rather than actually trying to fly in combat, because I'm not really a very good combat pilot, to be honest. I would say probably mediocre at best. bromelite.
Escaneo de asteroide completado. Tren de aterrizaje desplegado. Tren de aterrizaje replegado. Programando dron de extracción.
Oh, I think I missed that turn. No, I didn't. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we'll just do one more void opal
Escaneo de asteroide.
motherlode, and then we'll finish the video. And so I'm just going to do this as quickly as I reasonably can this time round. And you'll see again, the first thing I do, check to see how many low. I've only got one low and a bunch of average and then a couple of high. So I use that to sort of gauge how I want to approach it. If I can put on 2 low, then I'll go straight to that. If I only have like a 1 low and 1 average, then I like to know in advance of how to gauge the strength of it. Just I'm hopefully being as efficient as possible with fissures. Once you start the countdown timer, you can't stop it, you can only speed it up. So you don't really want to waste any more time than you have to, and you know
Secuencia de detonación iniciada.
exactly what you're going for. You don't want to spend ages looking for another low fissure if you're not going to get another low fissure. That's close. I think I might just do a little bit on an average. For fuck's sake. But because that was also low, because that was an average, and I've got an average that I can use again, I know not to go for quite so much charge this time. That's a really... Let's just go high. Apparently it's being much more sensitive than I'm used to.
Sísmica aplacada.
Different asteroids will have different overall health, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it. So you'll find that sometimes they'll be more sensitive to the amount of charge that you put on than others. It's just part and parcel of the process, I guess. It's getting used to being able to judge that, and I'm a bit out of practice at the moment.
Programando dron de extracción.
Pips the shield, just take the shockwave, and then back to engines so that I can maneuver nicely. I tend to seem to always leave the limpets behind at this stage. Maybe they get blown away by the shockwave, I'm not sure. Maybe they're just not as stupid as I am at trying to go head first into the middle of an asteroid that's just been blown up. We'll have a look which ones they're going to first.
Dron colector inactivo.
Oh, both of them seem to have killed themselves to start off with. That was a great beginning there, guys.
Programando dron de extracción.
And again, what I'd like to do is just position myself near clusters of fragments, just to make it quicker for the limpets to collect, so they've got less travelling time. Sometimes if you are the other side of a big bit of asteroid, then they spend all their time just trying to manoeuvre around it, and I'd rather avoid that if I can and just sort of make their life a bit easier. Where should I go? I think I'll go back to... Oh! Oh, you're all killing themselves today. They're so excitable. I thought they'd fixed the pathing. Apparently they've not fixed the pathing. I'm probably moving about more than is convenient for them at this stage, in fairness, but it's kind of just boring sitting there and waiting for them. He's going to do himself in trying to get that piece. Yep. Sometimes when that happens, I'll let the other one do itself in on that. But sometimes when that happens, you might find, I think the fragments maybe gone inside or clipped inside the asteroid, in which case it's just going to be a death trap for limpets trying to get to it. Oh no. Oh, there we go. That's alright. I have sometimes seen the fragments get clipped inside asteroids, in which case the limpet just spends ages trying to get it, or does itself in whilst it goes for it. Other times, if the angle that the limpets are approaching the asteroid at is wrong, as soon as the limpet picks up the fragment, it will do a little boost forwards, and if it's too close to an asteroid for the direction it's travelling in, it will just boost straight into the asteroid. So you kind of want to make sure your positioning is such that when they're travelling from you to the next fragment, they'll minimise the chance of that happening. Come. You also don't really want to do what I did just now, which is putting your base a bit too close to the asteroid, because that's where the cargo hatch is. So if they have to go through the asteroid to get to the cargo hatch, what I generally do instead is kill themselves, and that's not very efficient on the old limpets. One, two, cargo scoop, and we'll have a look, and now I'm at 45, so I was 28 before, so that would be 17, if my maths is not wrong. 17 tons from that, so I tend to find that generally I get between, I would say probably 12 and 15 per asteroid. I don't know how much difference it makes. I'll just turn off these, so I'm not gonna so they're not going to do me any harm. Tend to find that I get between 12 and 15 tons per asteroid. Is sort of modal. I would say 17 is an unusually large amount to get. When I was able to use the abrasion blaster exploit, I was probably getting 27 is probably about the average, so it does slow things down somewhat, but then again, I guess they made the decision that it was a glitch, not a feature. The reason I turned off the collectors just now is I tend to find that sometimes if I spend a lot of time boosting around, if you're travelling over, I think 200, sometimes they will pop or teleport back to their position at your underside. If you're travelling in such a direction where that would put them travelling, if your underside is the direction of travel, which is usually not going to be a risk when you're FAOn, but more likely to be happening, or not unheard of to happen when you're in FAOff, then they will actually collide with you through your shields and do you damage. And I've actually had a asp that's had a full hold of void opals that I was boosting away, so that I could find a position where I could engage my super cruise, where the teleportation of the limpets back into proximity with me actually destroyed the ship without touching the shields, which was quite annoying. So now I get in the habit of just turning off and on my collector controller when I'm not going to be using them for a bit, because usually by the time I next find an asteroid, oh that's the wrong, usually by the time I next find an asteroid that I'm going to be using them on, they've done themselves in from being out too long anyway. So it doesn't seem to make sense I risk doing myself damage for the sake of preservation of limpets if it's not actually going to make a difference to, or unlikely to make a significant difference to, whether or not I still need to use more limpets. I think that probably covers the main topics of how I go about doing asteroid mining. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.